It is January 15th, and this is another episode of the Scarlet Edit. How is everybody doing? You guys, how is it January 15th? How are we halfway through the first month of the year? Isn't January supposed to be the month that feels like it lasts 100 days? And we're already halfway through? Like, what is going on? I am back this week with another solo episode. There's going to be more solo episodes this year, like I've already mentioned, but I'm really, really excited because I want to talk. I want to share thoughts. I want to go deeper into some of the topics that we have covered on this show, some of the topics that are adjacent to topics we have covered. And I'm just really excited to have this time to sit and talk with all of you. So today I wanted to talk about one of the phrases that I strongly disagree with. And that phrase is once a cheater, always a cheater. And I am sure that some of you hearing that are saying, "What? I disagree with you 100%." And that is totally fine. Of course, we're all entitled to our own thoughts and opinions on the subject. But I have always been very convicted that I do not believe that just because somebody has an affair or cheats on somebody one time, that they are destined to do that for the rest of their lives. So I wanted to do some research because I was curious to know if once a cheater, always a cheater came from anywhere specific or if it came from anyone, if any author could be credited with saying that. And there isn't a documented first author of the saying. Linguistics folks do describe it as like a reusable formula. So, for example, once a thief, always a thief, once a fool, always a fool, or even going back to older things like a leopard doesn't change its spots or people don't change. Now, I think people can change. I think it's hard to change, but here's one of the main reasons why I so strongly disagree with once a cheater, always a cheater. What if you were 16? What if you were 25? I think before your brain is fully developed, like you can't sit and be like, "Oh, he cheated on his girlfriend when he was a junior in high school. Therefore, he's destined to always be a horrible partner and always cheat." Like, I don't think that's fair. But into adulthood, into the age range that we're all actually in right now, I also don't believe that if you do that one time, you're destined to do that for the rest of time, and that anyone who dares get in a relationship with you is destined to have their heart broken because you're going to cheat on them. Now, are you more likely to cheat again if you've cheated before? The data does show that prior infidelity is a meaningful risk marker. Now, I think that it is important to note that this risk marker from a very specific study where they talked to 484 people, this study measured sexual involvement. So actual sexual cheating. So that did not include emotional cheating. It did not include kissing, DMs, texting, all of the things that a lot of people do consider cheating and have the right to feel like they have been betrayed in those instances. The crazy thing about this type of data is that it's self-reported. It's hard to collect data on infidelity because it's not like when they come around and ring your doorbell and ask for the census, how many people live here. You don't say like, "Oh yeah, 2 adults, one child." And then they say, "Oh, okay, great. And has anyone ever had an affair?" Like, they're not asking those questions. So it's tough. But here's something that I thought was super interesting from a data perspective. So if somebody's partner cheated in a prior relationship, they were 2 times more likely to experience a partner cheating again. So that means if somebody cheated on you, you are 2 times more likely to be cheated on again. That fucking sucks, doesn't it? Like, why? I mean, that certainly makes me think like, okay, like, do we need to look inward? Like, what is it that is making that happen? Because there's 2 people in every relationship. So what choices would somebody be making a second time to choose someone that would then cheat on them and they would experience that feeling of infidelity again? And I'm certainly not blaming the person that got cheated on. I'm just more saying how much that sucks for them. Like, if somebody cheated on me and then I'm 2 times more likely to be cheated on again, I want to know why. And I want to know, can I make some changes within myself to decrease the odds of that happening again? Here's another crazy data point. If you suspected your partner of cheating before, then you're 4 times more likely to suspect it again. Like, why? Like, I'm so curious. Like, this really leads me to all of this, like, social, how do we interact with one another? How do we meet each other? What are we attracted to? Why are we attracted to certain people? And what are these qualities that are under the surface of somebody that could make them attractive to me or to one of you, but that the odds that they would cheat are so high? Like, that's nuts. So I also think that it's important to say that all of this stuff is that it's not saying that, like, if you cheated, you are for sure going to cheat again. It is just saying that there's risk. There is risk to you doing it again, right? It's a meaningful risk marker. It is not destiny. But the research were also really clear on the fact that patterns repeat more often. So let's talk about a serial cheater versus like a one affair cheater. Like, what's the difference? Because that was another thing that I was super curious about, because I think that it's very fair to say that there are plenty of people who have probably had one affair or who have cheated one time, whether it was like a drunken one night stand or a short to long term relationship with somebody else. But then there are serial cheaters, you know? I mean, I know that there are some of you listening who have been in relationships with serial cheaters who always have somebody else on the side in various forms. So serial cheater is something that is looked at as patterned behavior, right? So that would be infidelity across multiple relationships, where basically, like, anytime you're in a relationship, you're cheating on that person. It doesn't matter who they are. Or repeatedly cheating on your wife or husband or boyfriend or girlfriend, just over and over and over again. So, like, what types of behavior go along with that? Entitlement, like, the rules don't apply to me. I can do whatever I want. All right. We know how much fun it is to be with someone who is very entitled. Spoiler, it's not. Low empathy or accountability. So, kind of like they just don't really give a shit how you feel. So, they're going to do what they want to do. They have chronic secrecy and are really good at compartmentalizing. I think compartmentalization is definitely a skill that not all have, but some people have it to a frightening degree. And then little sustained behavior change after discovery. So that would kind of be like, hey, you caught your significant other cheating on you. And they were like, oh, yeah, whoopsie. And then they did it again. You know, this is the second time in like 2 years that I've said whoopsie on a podcast. And I have no idea why. I never say that word. And I remember distinctly the last time I said it, I think it was just over a year ago. So maybe it's my annual whoopsie. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Now, okay, let's talk about the one affair person. Like, and that's more situational. Maybe it's event linked. So that more often looks like it's tied to a specific context, maybe a life transition, untreated resentment, loneliness, conflict avoidant, opportunity, poor boundaries. So I'm sure a lot of you have recognized a lot of that behavior, right? I think loneliness, untreated resentment, conflict avoidance, I think those are 3 really big drivers. I mean, I will be saying this till I'm blue in the face on every podcast that anyone ever asks me questions about, is that everything comes down to communication. And trust me, I think we all know how hard communication can be. It can be impossible. It's scary. It's painful. It's anxiety inducing. It is all of the things. But if you cannot communicate with the person you are with, you are going to be setting yourself up for pain and heartache and maybe even disaster. I was actually on a show last week. It hasn't come out yet, but the guy was talking to me about all of these different topics. He runs a men's group. It was a men's focused podcast. He had heard me on another show, and so he invited me to come on this one. I really enjoyed our conversation, but I was talking so much about communication and how I know it can be so hard. I mean, even some of the most skilled negotiators have difficulty having tough conversations. But unfortunately, sometimes it's either you sit down and you have the tough conversation, or you sit and suffer in silence, and then you bad things can happen. So, context, life transition, resentment, loneliness, conflict avoidance. And then there's opportunity and poor boundaries, right? That's like, oh, I was away on a work trip. I got really drunk. I ended up hooking up with this girl. I can't even remember it. I don't know her name. Well, okay, but it still happened, right? And also, like, why did you get that drunk? Why were you in that situation? Like, why would that have even happened? Like, why were you all know anyone who's been in that situation, you know, the litany of questions that you just rapid fire when you inevitably find out. So let's talk a little bit about why the whole once a cheater, always a cheater mantra is dangerous. It basically says that we do not believe people can change. And yes, change is hard, but it is not impossible. And I do think that there are a lot of people out there who have cheated on their significant other and actually do feel genuine remorse. So it's such a broad stroke label that is so unfortunate. And I think that's the main reason why I have always just disagreed with it so strongly. I do think that people do have remorse. I do think that people do genuinely feel bad. And the other thing too is that every situation is so different. You could argue that the person who goes on a work trip, gets wasted, ends up hooking up with a stranger, comes back home, feels remorseful, shares what happened, is different than a person who gets in a long-term relationship with somebody else while they are in a committed relationship. I mean, I think those two things are vastly different. So I think it's wildly unfair, in fact, to label both of them with the once a cheater, always a cheater brush, or to paint both of them with that, right? The first person, they got drunk while they were out of town on a work event. They hooked up with somebody else. Does it suck? Absolutely. Do they feel bad? Yes. But should they be labeled as this lifetime adulterer? Similarly, the person who gets into a long-term relationship with somebody else while they are committed to somebody else, should they be considered once a cheater, always a cheater? I feel like what that person more so needs help with is communication and courage than working on not cheating. And let me explain this a little bit more. Communication, always. I've already talked about that. But courage. Courage is a word that came up more than once when I finally started sharing that I was going through a divorce. So this was before I was the other woman. This was a different time of my life. But I kept everything that was going on to myself. I wasn't sharing it with people that I worked with. I finally started sharing shortly before I was getting ready to move. I recall having not one, not two, but three different conversations with married men who I worked with about what was going on in my life. Every single one of them told me that my decision to get divorced was courageous. And I thought that was such an interesting word to use. I found it interesting because I hadn't viewed it from that perspective. I didn't think what I was doing was courageous. I thought I was doing what was best for me and what was best for my ex-husband. It was hard. It was hurtful. It was painful. It was really fucking sad. So courageous was not a word that I had thought about. So hearing these three grown men who clearly were not in the happiest of marriages, but we're still in them, tell me that my decision, my choice was courageous, I thought was really interesting. So, obviously, we all know a lot of people stay married for a number of reasons. Kids and money are probably the top two. But I just think that if you are unhappy, that you owe it to yourself to do what is best for you, because we only get this one life. We're only here one time. And like, what are you going to do? Why would you want to spend it being unhappy? Because I feel like if you're unhappy, you're not really making the other people around you very happy either. So let's move on a bit from that, because that's a whole other can of worms that I could probably talk for more like 20 minutes on. But here's one thing that I think is really important about this topic, and to tie it into being the other woman, right? I know that there are other women who are listening to this show. I was the other woman myself. When you are the other woman and you get caught. Now, I will say, I wouldn't necessarily categorize myself as being caught. So this is more not from my own experience. It's just from what I've seen time and time and time again with any sort of affair scandal that has hit the news, or anybody that I know in my personal life who has been involved in an affair and gotten caught. It's usually weaponized against the other woman. She's usually made out to be a really bad woman. And it's really unfortunate. Names like homewrecker, it's not always about the man that cheated. It's usually about controlling the narrative around the woman that's involved. And that sucks, because it takes two to tango. She didn't force him to be with her. She didn't handcuff him and tie him to her bed, you know? Um It's very easy to label the other woman as a cheater type. It's very easy to say that she's that kind of person. Because then a lot of times people don't end up wanting to ask harder questions about what was going on in that relationship. And it also ends up keeping that primary relationship void of scrutiny. It keeps the story very clean. There's a villain and there's a victim. And unfortunately, the other woman often gets labeled as that villain. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as the behavioral patterns, right? So it talks about patterns of behavior. It doesn't talk about somebody's moral character. So serial cheating is more about the person who repeatedly violates boundaries, not the person who once participated in a dynamic that they didn't fully control. Yet culturally, the other woman gets treated as she is the repeat offender by default. People will talk about her looks, the way she dresses, her vibe, her energy. Again, like, she looks like somebody that would do that. She looks like a home wrecker. So here's something that I haven't talked about yet. And I've thought about it because, being in the podcast space, and especially in the relationship podcast space, I interact with people on a regular basis who also have podcasts. I have told my story on a handful of podcasts now. And one of the things that I was thinking about towards the end of 2025 was that I am so much more than the fact that I was once the other woman, right? Yes, that is a part of my journey. That is a part of my story. It is a part of what made me who I am today, but it is not my entire identity. So what I'm really looking for now is to go on a lot of other podcasts that I can talk more about my whole life journey and all of the things that make me me, and the non-conventional path that I've taken. And of course, like, this does weave its way into it, but I think that I know I am so much more. Not I think, I know that I am so much more than just that one part of my story. So this is super important. Many women, myself included, who were the other woman, do not repeat that role. And I can tell you, I have spoken to so many women who have been in that role since starting this podcast. Every single one of them is like, oh, hell no, never again. And I say that too. There is not a chance in hell that I would ever walk that path again. And this is not me discounting all of the things that I have said about that relationship. I have been very honest that I loved that relationship. It taught me so much about myself. I grew so much as a woman. I learned so much about relationships, about the way that I want to be treated by somebody. And people are often shocked when I say these things that, like, no, it was a very real, very loving, very grounded, very easy, very friendship based relationship. It was truly wonderful until it wasn't. And that's kind of like any relationship. A lot of them are really great until they're not. But because he was married, yeah, I'm at a point where no, I am never going to be in that type of position again. I'm never going to put myself in that type of position again because I know that I deserve to be that leading lady. I am the leading lady. And if you have been in that position yourself, you know that you are the leading lady and you deserve to be that leading lady. You deserve to be the one that is on his arm, that he is walking proudly with, sharing with everybody. Like, look how great this woman is. How lucky am I to have her? So that is what I know to be true for me and so many other women that I've spoken to, is that, like, yes, this relationship is a part of our story, but it is not our entire identity. And yeah, we would not do that again. Like, that was a one-time role and we're good. We've done that. So, a serial cheater versus situational involvement. So, a serial cheater, again, repeats that betrayal from a position of commitment. They're married, they're in a committed relationship, but they keep finding someone else. They keep having dalliances with somebody else on the side. But the other woman often enters a situation with incomplete information, emotional manipulation, or false hope. But sometimes they don't enter it with any of that. Sometimes they know exactly what they're getting into. And I think that that's often a misconception, that, like, we're supposed to be manipulated and we're supposed to be led on or fed false promises. And sometimes no, sometimes there's just a very wild connection and something happens and we know exactly what is going on. I mean, I've said many a time about my own relationship. I was not given false promises. I knew exactly what was going on. And yes, I chose to be there. So a lot of people are in similar situations. But some people aren't. Some people find out and it is a huge surprise. Some people are like, holy shit, you're fucking married? I had no idea. And that sucks because that is harmful and that can make things really, really tough when you have been going down a path that you think is on the up and very open and free. So I guess I'm curious, does the other woman, or does once a cheater, always a cheater, like, stick harder? Which label are we really sticking on, boom, sticking on your chest? Like, that's what this show was named after, right? The Scarlet Letter, the Scarlet Edit. Which one sticks? Which one sticks? Society is more comfortable punishing women than interrogating men's behavior. I mean, I think we can agree on that. When I sighed right now, I thought about data points that are true. Women do file for divorce, I think 70% of the time, more than men. But I still think that women are punished harder for being the other woman than a man is punished for cheating. So, once a cheater, always a cheater, it can be a sentence that people use to end conversations that they're just uncomfortable having. That's one thing too about infidelity. I think that's why these episodes where I talk about infidelity myself, or when I have a guest on that talks about infidelity, I think that that's the reason that people are always searching and listening to those shows, is because it's such an uncomfortable conversation, yet so many people are so curious. So I want to continue to shed light on affairs and what goes on and how people got there and all of the nuance and all of the different things that people are curious about. Because finding out when it's a scandal, easily labeling once a cheater, always a cheater. I mean, look at the Coldplay couple. I'm sure people knew that that was going on, right? I mean, obviously, if they're there at a concert with other coworkers, it wasn't that big of a secret, but it certainly wasn't national news. So the second we all found out about it, it was a scandal, and all we were focused on was the scandal and labeling these people as horrible individuals. So, anyway, I'm excited to keep diving into these topics. If there's something specific that you're interested in learning more about, please comment, send me a DM. Come hang out on Instagram at thescarlet.edit. Come hang out on TikTok at Nikki underscore Corbett underscore. And if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel because it is growing and I have big goals for it. And YouTube makes you really put in the work to get to those monetization levels. And I'm chipping away at them week by week, but I would love the subscribe on YouTube if you're over there. If you are listening on Apple, please go on the app and rate this episode 5 stars. Tell me what you thought. And as always, I absolutely love this podcast. I love this community that is building. I love every single one of you that listen and that share your thoughts with me after the show is over. And I love all of you who are finding the show every week. When you DM me and share something with me, it truly makes my day. And it makes me know that this show was needed. These conversations were needed. And I am here to be that person for you. So thank you. I actually had a woman DM me the other day and say, "Thank God I found you." And it was so beautiful seeing that. I'm so grateful that she reached out to tell me that. And again, it just goes to show that these conversations are needed. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm excited for some guest episodes that are going to be coming out over the next few weeks. One other thing I want to plug if you're still listening, I am doing anonymous episodes. And I think that is going to be really interesting. Anonymous episodes with people who have been involved in an affair, whether they were the other woman or the other man, whether they were the one that was cheating on their significant other. I put out the call on Threads and Instagram, and I got some people that have reached out to me who want to come on and share their story anonymously. I know that these conversations are very delicate. They have a ton of repercussions in many cases. So being able to have anonymous conversations with people, I think is super important. And I also think will shed light from another perspective other than mine. So I'm very much looking forward to that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Scarlet Edit, and we will see you next week.